All right, in this video, I'm going to specifically focus on something called joins. And joins exist so that we can query between two tables. So here's a small example. In the next slide, we're going to look at more of an example where we're actually looking at the SQL statement. So this is more of just a visual of what happens when we join two tables. So there's a left join, there's a right join, there's an inner join, and then there's a full outer join. So let's take a look at that more specifically in terms of what is the various select statements we would need to structure out to return certain data from two tables. All right, so let's go to the next slide here. So here you'll see a series of joins. There's the inner, the full join, the left and the right join. The one I want to specifically take a look at is this inner join. And before we actually look at some of the code for the inner join, the big thing here with the joins is that the question you're asking yourself is, what data do I want to return? What data do I need to get from both of the tables is essentially the question you're asking. And so with the inner join, we're going to be looking at all of the data in table A, in this case that has a foreign key in table B. So return all the records that where the keys match, where the primary key of table A matches the primary the foreign key of table B. So if you look at the next slide here, you'll see here's my query. So I select not all of the columns, but I select only the artist name from the artist table and the album name from the album table from artists. And then I want to join the album table on where the artist ID is equal to the album's foreign key. So essentially where the primary key of the artist table is equal to the foreign key of the album table. And so if we run this query here, and let's bring up my editor. What we should get here is all of the various artists and their albums. And so there's some situations here where an artist had a top song that showed up twice. So for instance, like Bob Dylan has an album that is listed twice within the top 15, 16 albums of all time. So if we execute this, you'll see here's what it returns. We have the artist and the album name. And so we have the Beatles, where they have two albums that are listed. So their name shows up twice, and then Bob Dylan. And so essentially what it's doing is it's getting all the records that match the primary key and the artist table that matches up with the foreign key in the album table. And so that's an inner join. And again, it's one of the most commonly used joins, or it's one of the more most often used joins that you'll see and that you'll be using. So we can also extend this to say where, do a where clause to find a specific artist. And so let's say, for instance, if we want to go back and do a where clause, we can go here and say where artist ID is equal to, in this case here, let's actually do this. I don't remember all the artists, so let's do a select. Let's say where artist is equal to 5. And so, and I get rid of semicolon, and I should fix that. So we get the Beatles, and then we could say where artist is equal to 1, which will give us Marvin Gaye. And then let's see who's at position 9. And then Bob Dylan, right, in the two albums that are listed. So that's a use case of an inner join. And let me just say a few words about the other joins here. So what is the use case for the other joins? So if we jump back to our slides here, So we just did an example of an inner join where we matched the primary key with is equal to the foreign key in these two tables. Let's say that we look at a left join and a right join. A left join is saying, give me all the records and artists that match a record and album. And so whether it's found or not, give me all the records in A that matches a record in B. And the same here for the right join. Give me all the artists, well, give me all the albums in the album table that matches a record in A. So that's the difference between the two. So so for instance, in A, you could potentially have some, let's say some artists that may have a null value that don't have an album. In our set, that's not true. All of our artists have a matching album, but let's say that we did have the participation was that an artist can exist within the table without an album. And if that was the case, then there could potentially be some artists who don't have a matching record or a matching album in the B table. So again, the big question you're asking here is, what information do I need back from my data? And that's going to help you structure out your query. So I would say play around with this, pause this video, play around with the data set, change some of the values in the data set, because the way that the current data set between artists and albums, that an artist has a album. But you may want to alter the data set to say that an artist does not have any particular album, or add a new artist without an album. And you can see the difference between the data and what would be returned if you use some of these different joins. Okay, let me pause there. And then in the next video, we'll talk about, we'll discuss this concept of group by, and then we'll also talk about this clause of having, or where is that? Yeah, the having clause. So stay tuned for that, and we'll end this video series in just a few more videos. Stay tuned.